We are good to go. You ready, Helium? Okay, go ahead.
The United States still uses democracy today. We learned how to vote and pick our new leaders from ancient Greece. The central element of the United States system is run by democracy, a form of government in which the ultimate power rests in the people and not just the leaders. There have been arguments and protests about who gets to have the say. In 1776, the founders of the United States were strong proctors of our community and started democracy in the United States.
Ancient Greece was really important because it was the first to let regular people have a say in how the country was run. This idea that everyone's voice matters is still really important today. The ideas about democracy from ancient Greece are still around today and have influence on how countries are run. They believe that everyone should be included in making decisions, and that's a big part of how things work in our government now.
Ancient Greece showed that everyone should be involved in how things are run. Their ideas about democracy have stayed with us for a long time and still impact our country and government today.
In simple terms, the ancient Greeks had a strong economy because they made and traded things that people wanted, like wine and olive oil. They also had a lot of smart ideas, and they wrote them down so that those ideas could be shared and used for a long, long time.
Okay, nice job, you guys. Opposition. You guys will have 3 minutes in just a second for your opening statement. Okay. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi. We are here today because we believe that Greek democracy was unsuccessful. Ella, can you remind me, what does democracy mean?
For the people.
But if women, slaves, and foreigners were not allowed to vote, which means only 30% of people were allowed to vote, then how many people would actually be pleased? Men were forced to join the government. If they didn't, they would get fined. I don't know how much, but I know it was probably a lot back in those times. The aristocrats were chosen by vote. The aristocrats were not chosen by vote. They were chosen by lottery. It was completely random and not fair. If the wrong people were chosen, it could lead to bad things.
Imagine if every time the government wanted to pass a law, all 250 million people would have to vote. It's hard to vote only 200, but 200 million. We're not saying that democracy is all bad. We're saying that the way the Greeks did it was completely unfair.
Okay, so right now you guys can split up into your respective teams and take 5 minutes to form a cohesive rebuttal using the notes that you already have and what the other team just said, okay? Start the timer, hang on. Audience, are we quiet? Okay, ready?
Now, while Greek democracy had the exclusion of women, slaves, and non-citizens, it was pretty normal for the Greek democracy to exclude certain groups. And even then, it was a big step in giving power to the citizens. This exclusion was normal at the time and doesn't take away from the democratic principles that were set.
Even though the democracy was random, it allowed people to The internal conflicts and power struggles were part of the competitive nature of the city-states. It's important to know that these struggles were a result of the complicated political situation at the time, rather than a failure of the democratic idea.
Now, even though it was random, it was only random for the senators. Now, for the big roles, such as what you would call now the president, it was actually, as a matter of fact, elected. So let's suppose one specific senator that was voted at random would be in this case someone you don't like. He can't have a lot of power. Now let's suppose you wanted a big change to happen in the Greek democracy. You would actually vote for a president.
So in conclusion, while Greek democracy had its limits, it laid the foundation for democratic principles that continue to shape its modern government systems.
Okay. Opposition, you ready?
Its fundamental constructs have remained the same for thousands and thousands of years. It hasn't not changed. They were the first to learn about democracy, but that doesn't mean they were the first to have it. There could have been a ton of places that had it first, but didn't write down first.
Voting majority wasn't good back in ancient Greece because the people weren't educated back then. And uneducated people don't do smart things. Democracy was different from ancient Greece than it is today because in ancient Greece, it was a civic duty to vote. You could not skip out even if you wanted to.
Okay. Okay, closing statements will be 2 minutes each. If you're on the closing statements, please come up. Closing statements, please come up. Okay, is this it? Closing statements? Okay, proposition, are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
We believe that in ancient Greece, democracy was a success. If you have yet to hear our points of view during this discussion with other speakers, we can repeat for you. The reason we still have democracy today is because of ancient Greece. Ancient Greece shows that it's important for everyone to be involved in how things are run. Ancient Greece was really important because it was first to let regular people have a say in how the country was run.
A U.S. state resembles the structure of an ancient Greek polis or a city-state. The ancient Greek polis or city-state, a U.S. state can be seen as having a similar structure. A polis consisted of a central city and the surrounding land. Major cities like Athens, Sparta, and Corinth hosted significant events for Greece. However, there were incidents where leaders of armies, generals in Athens, Sparta, and Corinth united to support men's opinions instead of those of women's or slaves. A U.S. state resembles the structure of an ancient Greek polis or city-state. We, as the proposition, believe that everyone should have a say in their opinion and make sure government is fair for everyone.
Okay, opposition, you ready, JP?
These reasons of why the Greek democracy was not successful that we presented show that the Greek democracy was not for the people, but more in favor of the leaders of the government and very forceful, as the men were forced into running in the government or they would get a fine. The Greek democracy was also partially unfair and totally random, as the aristocrats were not chosen by voting, but instead chosen by a lottery. The reasons also show that a big percentage of the Greek population was not represented in the government, as women, kids, foreigners, and slaves were not able to vote or participate. Only men. The only options for men were to participate or to get a fine, and for the rest of the people, there was no option at all. How is a democracy for the people if it's only for 30% of the population and didn't give people a choice? This shows that they obviously needed more improvements on the government system.
Awesome. Okay, round of applause to all of you. We still have our Q&A. Okay, send 1 or 2 people up to represent your team for the Q&A. Okay, and then if for some reason whoever's up on the stage doesn't have an answer, or if someone from the audience wants to contribute to an answer, you're more than welcome to help out. So right now we are going to take, let's see what time it is. Okay, we're gonna take 2 minutes. I want everyone to come up with one question that they have for the different team. So either for the opposition or proposition, whichever one you were not a part of. One question that you have for the other team. Come up with one question, okay?
I have a question.
Think about it. Take 2 minutes to come up with one question that you have for the other
Should I
team.
tell it authority?
When you have a question, is it for me or is it
I have a
for
question for you.
Yeah.
Are we gonna, is everyone in our team gonna go up and ask a question?
I don't, whatever we'll have time for, it might just be a couple.
So what do we do when we think of a question?
You just ask it.
In the audience or go up there?
From the audience, okay? So take a minute to come up with your question, okay? When you have your question, raise your hand so I know you're ready. When you have your question, raise your hand so I know you're ready. And Mr. Clark, if you have questions now is a good time too.
No,
Hang on, we're gonna wait a minute, yeah. Just for everyone to take a second to think of a question. When you have a question, raise your hand so I know you're ready.
don't be shy.
Everyone has to come up with something.
Yeah, no choice.
This is your chance to get at the other group.
Does he have to come up with a question if he's answering it?
No, but if you have a question to contribute or have an idea, you can tell a group member to ask it. Okay, so our first question is going to come from Mr. Clark.
So I was going to ask, one of the arguments I heard was that the United States sort of copied a lot of ancient Greece. I was going to ask if you feel that the United States has any flaws with its democracy, or was it copied well over, or were there some, did it copy any mistakes that they had?
So, the original democracy was formed from Greece. Now, U.S. Adapted that, but actually, the very first U.S. democracy, as a matter of fact, it was exactly like the Greek democracy. Women didn't get a chance. Now, while it wasn't random, it was a voting system, which was not as a flaw, but since there wasn't really any other way, because Greek was a really, really big part in the world. So the best way they did it was through a lottery system instead of counting ballots. Now, USA adapted that, but instead of taking the random, they did the voting system since technologies were far more advanced. And then later they started a protest. Women and, as we would say, blacks would be able to vote. So yes, US really adapted that, but they changed not a lot of flaws, only 2. But that's only because in Greek, those flaws only happened because it was normal at the time and because of the technology that was not there.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to a question for RA. So RA, you can call on somebody.
No, yes, it has to be from another team.
Yeah.
Where does it say that men had to vote and be a part of the government?
Men have to what?
Vote and be a part of the government?
In the article that you're
That was
the
an
article that we read in class.
How do you know those are people?
Okay, RA.
Novel.
Okay, you're saying, first off, 30% of people were allowed to vote. Men, women, and foreigners and slaves were not allowed to vote. Also, you answered this question. The way that you answered it didn't make sense for years after America was founded, women were still not allowed to vote. Black people were still not allowed to vote.
Yes, and that was the same as it was in the Greece democracy.
Yeah, but they obviously didn't copy it over well if it was that for years, and then a woman had to go and make a petition. She was in jail because she tried to
That's
vote.
exactly how the Greece democracy was. What's your
Exactly. So you're not. So you're not saying that. So you're not saying that was. So then how is it copied over well if
complicated? Because it was a voting system as well as the Greek democracy, which they invented.
Okay.
Feel free to chime in if you want.
Okay, so I was to follow up on that. I was going to ask the other side too. Is it not the case that in America those things, or that ancient Greece? How was I going to phrase the question? In America, those things changed, right? They got rid of them. So would it have been possible that maybe that could have happened in ancient Greece, despite the slaves, women, all those groups? Would it have been possible, you think, for that to perhaps change at some point?
I'm confused with the question.
So I guess I'm saying, do you feel like in the democracy of ancient Greece, do you think that even though you're right, they limited it to those groups, do you feel that it may have changed at some point? Do you think it could have?
I think, yeah, it definitely has changed the different ways of voting.
Wait, I have a question.
Let's go to. Yeah, Ari.
You said there's a fine. You said there's a big fine. How do you know it's a big fine? And why don't, if it was, how do you not know what?
Because most likely back in these days, like
It's assumption.
let's say $30, $16 was like $300.
But
It's a lot.
so it's assumption.
Yeah, it's
So you're
assumption.
assuming.
Yeah, we are.
So that's not facts.
Okay.
You said big one.
But it is.
There's no dollars.
It's a law. It's a law that they have to be
Yeah,
in it.
and if they don't, in other words, if the government,
No,
let's
but you're still.
if let's say the U.S. was saying all men must join the army, most likely if they refused to join the army, they would get fined a lot.
But you wouldn't put
Because
that as.
you probably have a choice to either go to jail or get fined, so
But it's
you
still not
probably get fined a
facts.
lot.
It's
Wait.
still not facts.
Yeah, okay, fine, it's not fact, it's a good assumption. It's not like a random guess, it's a good assumption.
Actually, as a matter
Okay, let's move on to Ari asking a question.
You never.
Or sorry, Ari taking a question.
I'll actually take it from none.
Okay, so how is democracy the same today? Okay, today it's different because
How's it different?
it's a representative democracy today, but back then in ancient Greece it was a direct democracy.
Direct democracy. So, do you agree that they're both democracies?
They are.
That's your answer. So they're both democracies, but
They're
they're two different types of democracies, but they're in the same way. So let's suppose they both count on a voting system, which is also adapted. Now that might be different. That it's representative. Actually, there was also it wasn't a representative. It was direct, but because the U.S. Changed rules away, but it was democracy, which both relied on voting.
Other than voting, because we know democracy has to do with voting, what else is the same?
What else is the same? So as well, it was rather than a voting system, it was a random system, but yes, the whole point of a democracy is to choose your representatives for the state, which was what happened. So for the higher positions, they got to vote for the democracy.
That was
For
not
the president.
the question.
What's the question?
The question is what is the same between the two democracies other than voting? You keep listing voting. What's the same other than voting?
So also representatives were chosen through it wasn't a voting system, but it was a random system, so it was chosen for their state. I don't know what else you mean for a democracy, because a democracy is where people have a say, people do have a say. So I don't know what else you would like me to.
Does someone else from your team want to add? Yeah, Ariella.
Even though like you're saying that it's like in Greece they had a direct democracy instead of like a representative, it's still like this somewhat like the same concept. They still have like it's still democracy. The people still have a choice, but it was done a little bit differently in Greece.
Okay, so
Can I just?
hang on one second, you guys. We do not have time to keep taking questions, so we are going to stop it there. So, real quick, what I want to do is sum everything up. So, proposition, I want you to real quick just say, what were your 3 reasons for why democracy was a success? Proposition, can someone, or Ari or someone else raise your hand and tell me, what were your 3 reasons, clear and concise, why democracy was a success? What were your 3 reasons? Yeah.
So my 3 reasons was it first started with the voting system. Now other governments, what they used to have is they used to be sort of they used to just go up and say, I'm president, but now they started a voting system. Now while they didn't include women and slaves, they did have a voting system. Another reason was that they at a convention when people would come and they would say what really mattered. And they believed that everybody should be included in making decisions. And
What's the 3rd one?
oh, sorry, I didn't say the 3rd.
I have voting system, everyone included in decisions. Do you guys have a 3rd? Ari's team? What's your 3rd reason?
We have, it's evolved from how it was run before, so it's basically built off of how democracy was run. How democracy is run today, it's basically built off of ancient Greece.
Okay, opposition, what are your 3 reasons?
If only 30% of the population if only 30% of the population got to vote, then
Okay,
it clearly wasn't fair.
right.
And for the aristocrats, when they were chosen by lottery, which was not fair too, because then it should have been by voting too.
Okay.
It still wasn't fair. And voting majority wasn't good because they were not educated back then.
Okay. Okay. Great job, you guys. So here's what's gonna happen right now. Mr. Clark and I are gonna chit chat. And you guys can talk.
All right, so the winner is, was the opposition.
Yeah.
Wait, why'd you say was?
Wait, what?
It is.
Was.
Okay. And Mr. Clark is going to share why.
Oh yes, okay. So we felt that the opposition, they had a really good line of reasoning. They kept the line of reasoning throughout, during the rebuttal and during their main presentation. They had they made really good arguments. There was one thing we noticed, of course, aristocrats were actually elected. They were voted on. It wasn't by lottery. But I mean, there were slight mistakes on both sides, but regardless, we felt that you guys had a great line of argument. So good job.
Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome job, everyone. Yeah, so the aristocrats were actually voted in. They were the only position that was voted in. Everything else was done by lottery. I want to make it very clear that a lot of this was random. That was a big thing in ancient Greece and their democracy. A lot of it was random and was not really voted for with regards to positions. That's why it was a direct democracy and not a representative democracy. Yes, they voted on laws and things like that, but not on positions, right? So that's a big difference between our democracy today and the democracy that existed in ancient Greece, okay? But awesome job for both of you. The proposition had a really, really awesome rebuttal.
Yes.
And both opening statements and closing statements were great. So great job to both teams. I can't believe how well prepared and into it you guys got. I am so incredibly proud of you guys.
It was really good.
Yeah, so great job. You did awesome. And that's it. I will find you guys at some point throughout today because I want you guys to fill out like a little team evaluation sheet. So maybe I'll come find you during lunch to fill those out.
What's that?
I'll find you during the football. But that's it. You guys can go to my classroom, get your backpacks, and you are good to go to your next class. Okay, thank you.